The throne room of Emperor Zalveth stretched for nearly a kilometer. Pillars of black stone rose toward a ceiling so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. Golden light fell through windows carved from single pieces of crystal, each one worth more than most planets produced in a century. This was the heart of the Valthari Empire, and it had stood unchanged for 12,000 years. Emperor Zalveth sat upon the eternal throne, a massive structure built from the bones of conquered kings and the metals of dead worlds. His scales were deep purple, almost black, and his four eyes glowed with the cold intelligence that had kept his family in power for 600 generations. Around him stood his advisors, his generals, and his priests. They waited in silence for him to speak. "Tell me again," the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "Tell me about this beacon." Admiral Rethgar stepped forward. He was old for a Valthari warrior. His scales faded to a pale blue, but his mind remained sharp. He had conquered 30 systems in his career and had never known defeat. "My Emperor, our scouts reached the edge of Sector 749 3 cycles ago. They found an automated station broadcasting a warning message." "A warning," the Emperor repeated. He found the word amusing. "Yes, my Emperor. The message plays in thousands of languages, including our own. It claims that the space beyond belongs to something called the Terran Confederacy. It tells all ships to turn back." Laughter rippled through the throne room. The Valthari had heard such claims before. Every few centuries, some minor species would declare themselves masters of their little corner of space. They would make threats and demands, and then the Empire would crush them, add their worlds to the ever-growing map, and forget their names within a generation. "The Terran Confederacy," the Emperor said, tasting the strange words. "Our intelligence networks have no record of this name." "That is correct, my Emperor. We have searched our archives going back 8,000 years. There is no mention of any species called Terrans, no record of any confederacy by that name. Our best guess is that whatever civilization placed this beacon has long since collapsed." "How old is the beacon?" Admiral Rethgar hesitated. This was the part of the report that troubled him. "Our scientists estimate it has been broadcasting for approximately 400 standard years, perhaps longer. 400 years. The Emperor leaned forward slightly. "And it still functions?" "Perfectly, my Emperor. The power source shows no signs of decay. The machinery appears to be self-repairing. Our engineers have never seen technology quite like it." One of the Emperor's advisors, an ancient female named Kethsara, stepped forward. She had served 3 emperors before this one, and her wisdom was respected throughout the court. "My Emperor, perhaps we should proceed with caution. A beacon that functions perfectly after 4 centuries suggests a civilization of considerable advancement, or it suggests a civilization that poured all its resources into one impressive machine before dying," the Emperor replied. "Tell me, Admiral, what lies beyond this beacon? What have your scouts seen?" "Empty space, my Emperor. Systems with planets, some of them rich in resources, but no signs of current habitation. No ships, no stations, no colonies. Just the beacon and silence." The Emperor smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Then the matter is simple. Whatever species placed this beacon is gone. Their warning is meaningless. Their space is now ours." Kethsara tried once more. "My Emperor, the message itself is troubling. It says, 'This is your only warning.'" "Such confidence suggests..." "It suggests nothing," the Emperor interrupted. "Dead civilizations cannot make threats. Admiral Rethgar, you will take the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet across this border. You will claim every system you find for the glory of the Valthari Empire. You will search for any remnants of this so-called confederacy and determine if they pose any threat. And if we find them, my Emperor, then you will destroy them, as we have destroyed all who stood against us." Admiral Rethgar bowed low. "It will be done." 3 weeks later, the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet gathered at the edge of known space. 40,000 warships hung in formation around the alien beacon, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. Each ship carried weapons capable of reducing cities to ash, shields that could withstand nuclear fire, and crews trained from birth for conquest. Admiral Rethgar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Vengeance. It was a dreadnought of the old design, 15 kilometers long, built to inspire terror in all who saw it. Around it floated dozens of similar vessels, surrounded by thousands of smaller cruisers, destroyers, and support ships. "Status report," the admiral commanded. His second officer, a young warrior named Vexistal, consulted his displays. "All ships report ready. Admiral, the fleet is at full combat readiness. We can cross the border on your command." Rethgar turned to look at the beacon. It floated in space, a simple cylinder perhaps 100 meters long, covered in strange symbols and blinking lights. Even now, it continued its endless broadcast, warning ships away in languages living and dead. "We have analyzed the beacon's message in detail," Vextal continued. "It appears to have been placed here deliberately, positioned at what must have been the edge of this Confederacy's territory. The technology is unlike anything in our databases. Unknown technology does not mean superior technology," Rithgar said. "It simply means different. The galaxy is vast. Many species have developed along paths different from our own. This does not make them our equals." "Of course, Admiral. Begin the crossing. All ships, standard formation. We will proceed at survey speed and document everything we find." The fleet moved as one, 40,000 ships sliding past the beacon and into the unknown. As they crossed the invisible border, sensors swept the space ahead, searching for any sign of life, any hint of the civilization that had placed the warning. They found nothing. Day after day, the fleet pressed deeper into the unclaimed territory. They passed through system after system, finding planets of every type. Some were barren rocks, others were gas giants with valuable atmospheric compounds, and a few were worlds that could have supported life. But none of them were inhabited. What they did find were signs of activity. Old signs. Asteroid belts that had clearly been mined, stripped of valuable metals with surgical precision. Planets with strange markings on their surfaces, geometric patterns visible from orbit that served no obvious purpose. Abandoned structures on airless moons, empty and silent, their purpose unknown. Someone was here. Vextal reported during their second week. "The evidence is everywhere. Mining operations, construction projects, even what appear to be agricultural facilities on some of the more habitable worlds. But everything has been abandoned." Quote, "How long ago? Difficult to say with certainty. The facilities show no signs of decay, which suggests either very recent abandonment or extremely advanced preservation technology. Some of our scientists believe these structures are centuries old. Others think they could have been abandoned last year." Admiral Rethgar studied the reports with growing unease. He had conquered many worlds in his career, and he had learned to read the signs of civilization. What he saw here did not match any pattern he knew. When a species died out, they left ruins. Crumbling cities, corroded machines, the slow decay of everything they had built. But these structures showed no decay at all. They were simply empty, as if their occupants had walked away one day and never returned. "There is another possibility," Vextal said carefully. "These facilities may not be abandoned at all. They may simply be unmanned, automated. You think this entire region is run by machines? It would explain what we're seeing. Automated mining operations would not need permanent crews. Automated farms would not need farmers. If this Confederacy developed sufficient artificial intelligence, they could harvest the resources of dozens of systems without ever setting foot in them. And where would the resources go?" Vextal was silent for a long moment. "Somewhere we haven't found yet, Admiral. Somewhere deeper in their territory." Rethgar turned back to the view screen. Ahead lay more empty systems, more silent worlds, more questions without answers. The warning beacon's message echoed in his mind. "This is your only warning." What had they been warning about? What was out there, waiting in the darkness? "We continue forward," the Admiral decided. "The Emperor has commanded us to find answers. We will not return until we have them." On the 20th day, they found the Kepler system. It was unremarkable at first glance. A yellow star orbited by 7 planets, 2 of them gas giants, and the rest rocky worlds of various sizes. But as the fleet entered the system, their sensors detected something that made every officer on every ship sit up straight. A power signature. Massive, coming from behind the largest gas giant. "All ships to battle stations," Admiral Rethgar commanded. "Move to intercept formation. I want full sensor coverage of whatever is behind that planet." The fleet spread out, weapons powered and shields raised. 40,000 ships moved with practiced precision, ready for combat against an unknown enemy. This was what they had trained for, what they had been born for. After weeks of empty systems, they finally had a target. The object emerged slowly from behind the gas giant's curve. It was a ship, clearly artificial, but unlike anything the Valthari had ever seen, where their vessels were angular and aggressive, built to intimidate. This ship was smooth and organic, almost flowing in its design. It was perhaps a kilometer long, tiny compared to the Valthari dreadnoughts, painted in colors that seemed to shift as they watched. One ship, Vextal reported, confusion clear in his voice. Just one ship, Admiral, no other contacts. They send one ship against 40,000? Rethgar felt a mixture of amusement and insult. Either they are fools, or this is merely a messenger. Open communications. Let us hear what they have to say. The communications channel opened, and a voice came through. It spoke perfect Valthari, without accent or hesitation, as if the speaker had been born to the language. Valthari fleet, you have crossed into Terran space despite our warning. You have violated our border and ignored our clearly stated wishes. We do not know if this is an act of war or simply a misunderstanding, but we are willing to give you one chance to explain yourselves. Admiral Rethgar leaned forward. This is Admiral Rethgar of the Valthari 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. We are here by command of Emperor Zalveth, ruler of all known space. Your warning beacon claimed territory that belongs to no one. We have come to claim these systems for the Empire. There was a pause, and when the voice spoke again, it carried a note of something that might have been sadness. We placed those warnings 400 years ago, Admiral. We placed them at every approach to our space. We made them clear and simple to understand. We did this because we had learned, through terrible experience, that the galaxy is not a friendly place. We wanted to be left alone. We still want that. The Valthari Empire does not recognize your claim. You will surrender this system and all others in this region, or you will be destroyed. Another pause. Admiral, I urge you to reconsider. Take your fleet and return to your Emperor. Tell him that the Terran Confederacy has no interest in war, no desire for conflict. Tell him that we will respect his borders if he respects ours. There does not need to be violence here. Rethgar laughed. The sound echoed across the bridge, and his officers joined in. One ship, asking 40,000 to retreat. It was absurd. You are brave, the Admiral said. I will grant you that. But bravery is not enough against the might of the Valthari Empire. You have one chance to surrender. Take it, or be destroyed. The voice sighed. Very well. You were warned. Remember that, Admiral. When this is over, remember that you were warned. The communication ended. Target that vessel, Rethgar commanded. All forward ships open fire. 300 Valthari warships turned their weapons on the tiny human craft. Plasma cannons, particle beams, missile batteries, all the terrible weapons of the Empire's arsenal. They fired as one. A storm of destruction that should have vaporized a small moon. The light was blinding. Energy washed across the human ship in waves, surrounding it completely, hiding it from view. For a long moment, the bridge crew could see nothing but the flash of their own weapons. Then the light faded. The human ship hung in space, exactly where it had been. Undamaged, untouched. A faint shimmer surrounded it. Some kind of energy field that had absorbed everything the Valthari threw at it. Silence fell across the bridge of the eternal vengeance. In all his years of warfare, Admiral Rethgar had never seen anything survive such an attack. It was impossible. It was against everything he knew about physics, about weapons, about war. The human ship began to move. It did not accelerate like normal vessels, building speed gradually. It simply moved, going from stationary to impossible velocity in an instant. The Valthari sensors could barely track it as it shot toward the nearest cruiser. What happened next took 11 minutes. In those 11 minutes, Admiral Rethgar watched his entire fleet die. Not destroyed, he would realize later. Disabled, the human ship moved through his formation like a predator among prey. And everywhere it went, Valthari ships went dark. Weapons powered down. Engines failed. Ships that had been ready for combat became drifting hulks, helpless and silent. 40,000 ships, millions of crew, disabled by a single vessel in 11 minutes. When it was over, the human ship returned to its original position. The communication channel opened again. "Tell your Emperor what you saw here, Admiral. Tell him that we could have destroyed you all, but we chose not to. Tell him that this was mercy, and there will be no second mercy. If Valthari ships cross our border again, we will not be so gentle." Admiral Rethgar tried to speak, but no words came. "Go home," the voice said. "Go home and tell them. Tell them the warning was real." The communication ended. The human ship turned and disappeared behind the gas giant, moving so fast it seemed to simply vanish. Admiral Rethgar stood alone on his powerless bridge, surrounded by the silence of a defeated fleet, and wondered what he would tell the Emperor. Whatever he said, he knew one thing for certain. The warning had been real, and the Empire had ignored it. The message arrived at the Imperial Palace 3 weeks after the disaster. It came on an emergency channel, encrypted with codes that only the highest levels of government could access. When Emperor Zalveth read it, he destroyed the communication device with his bare hands. Admiral Rethgar had failed. Not just failed, but failed completely, utterly, in a way that no Valthari commander had failed in over 8,000 years. 40,000 ships, disabled by a single enemy vessel. The entire 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, reduced to drifting metal by something that moved too fast to track and used weapons that could not be stopped. The Emperor summoned his war council. They gathered in the strategy chamber, a room deep beneath the palace where the secrets of conquest had been planned for centuries. Holographic displays showed the map of the Empire, a vast sea of conquered space stretching across half the galaxy. At the edge of that map was a dark region, unexplored and unknown, the human region. "Explain this to me," the Emperor said, his voice cold as the void between stars. "Explain how 40,000 of our finest warships were defeated by one small vessel. Explain how our weapons, which have conquered 100 species, did nothing." Grand Admiral Kethvar stepped forward. He was the highest-ranking military officer in the Empire, commander of all Valthari forces, and he had built his career on understanding warfare, but he had no explanation for what had happened in the Kepler system. "My Emperor, we have analyzed the sensor data transmitted by the 3rd Fleet before their power systems failed. The human vessel used defensive technology unlike anything in our databases. Some kind of energy absorption field that redirected our weapons' fire harmlessly into space. Our scientists do not understand how it works. They do not even have theories. And their weapons? Unknown. The sensor data shows brief energy pulses, lasting less than a microsecond each. These pulses somehow shut down all power systems on our ships without causing structural damage. Fusion reactors, weapons arrays, life support backups. Everything went dark simultaneously. Our engineers cannot explain how this was achieved. It should not be possible." Emperor Zalveth stared at the map, at the dark region where his fleet had died. "You are telling me that we face an enemy with technology so advanced that our best minds cannot even understand it?" "Yes, my Emperor. And you are telling me that this enemy disabled our fleet but did not destroy it. They left our ships intact, our crews alive, and then told them to deliver a message. The message was a warning, my Emperor. They said there would be no second mercy." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. The War Council waited, not daring to speak. They had all seen what happened to those who spoke out of turn in the Emperor's presence. "They made a mistake," Zalveth finally said. "A serious mistake. They showed us what they can do, but they showed us something else as well. They showed us that they are reluctant to kill. They had our entire fleet at their mercy, and they chose to let them live. This is weakness." "My Emperor," Kethvar said carefully, "perhaps it would be wise to send diplomatic envoys before." "Before what? Before we avenge this insult? Before we demonstrate to the galaxy that the Valthari Empire does not bow to threats?" The Emperor rose from his throne, his scales darkening with anger. "This human confederacy thinks they can frighten us with one impressive ship and one impressive display. They are wrong. We have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We have crushed every species that stood against us. We will not be intimidated by a civilization so pathetic that they hide behind warning beacons rather than expand their territory." He turned to Kethvar. "You will assemble the largest fleet in our history. Every ship we have, every weapon we have ever built. We will cross that border with such overwhelming force that no technology, no matter how advanced, can stand against us. We will find their worlds and burn them. We will find their people and enslave them. and we will make certain that no one in this galaxy ever ignores a Valthari command again. My Emperor, Kethvar said, such a mobilization will take time. We will need to gather ships from across the Empire, coordinate supply lines, prepare for a campaign of unknown length. It could take 6 months or more. Then you have 6 months. Use them well. The War Council bowed and departed, leaving the Emperor alone with his thoughts. He walked to the great window that overlooked the palace gardens, a vast expanse of carefully maintained wilderness that had been transplanted from 100 conquered worlds. For the first time in his long reign, Emperor Zalveth felt something he did not recognize. It took him several minutes to identify it. It was uncertainty. The news of the Third Fleet's defeat spread through the Empire like fire. Despite efforts to contain it, rumors reached every world, every station, every ship. The mighty Valthari, undefeated for millennia, had been humiliated by a single enemy vessel. On conquered worlds, the subject races heard the news and whispered among themselves. Could it be true? Was there really a power out there that could stand against the Valthari? For species that had lived under the Empire's boot for generations, it was a spark of hope they had not felt in centuries. The Valthari military worked day and night to prepare for the coming campaign. Ships were recalled from distant stations. Factories on 100 worlds produced weapons and ammunition at maximum capacity. Training programs were accelerated, pushing new recruits through courses that normally took years in a matter of months. Grand Admiral Kethvar personally oversaw the preparations. He studied the sensor data from the Kepler system until he knew every frame by heart. He consulted with the Empire's greatest scientists, trying to understand the technology they faced. And he made plans, dozens of plans, for every scenario he could imagine. But deep in his heart, Kethvar harbored doubts he could never express. He was a soldier, not a fool. He knew the difference between confidence and arrogance, and what he had seen in that sensor data frightened him in ways he could not explain. The human ship had not just defeated the Third Fleet. It had played with them. It had moved through their formation like they were standing still, disabling ships with surgical precision, never once hitting the same target twice. Every move had been perfect, every action calculated. It was like watching a master warrior toy with children, and it had been alone. If the humans could do that with one ship, what could they do with 100? 1,000? What if the ship at Kepler had not been their best, but merely a patrol craft? What if the technology they had shown was considered outdated by their standards? These thoughts kept Kethvar awake at night, but he shared them with no one. The Emperor had made his decision. The Empire would strike back with everything it had, and Kethvar would lead them, because that was his duty, even if he suspected they were walking into something they did not understand. 6 months passed. The Armada gathered at the border. 2 million warships from every corner of the Empire. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons floated alongside sleek destroyers and massive carrier vessels. Support ships carried enough supplies to sustain the fleet for years. Hospital ships stood ready to tend to the wounded. Prison ships waited to carry human slaves back to Valthari space. It was the greatest military force ever assembled in known history. The combined might of 100 conquered species, all bent to a single purpose: the destruction of the Terran Confederacy. Admiral Rethgar was not among them. The Emperor had executed him upon his return, officially for incompetence, unofficially as a message to anyone who might consider failure an option. His replacement, a younger officer named Vethkar, commanded the forward elements of the fleet. Grand Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Divine Retribution. It was the largest warship ever built, 20 kilometers long, carrying weapons capable of cracking planets in half. Around it floated 50 similar vessels, the core of the Emperor's hammer that would crush the humans once and for all. All ships report ready, Grand Admiral. His aide reported. The fleet awaits your command. Kethvar looked at the border ahead. The warning beacon still floated there, still broadcasting its endless message. He had ordered it left in place as a reminder of what they were fighting for. Open a channel to all ships. The communications array activated, connecting him to 2 million vessels and the tens of millions of warriors who crewed them. Soldiers of the Empire, Kethvar began, his voice strong and certain despite his private doubts. 6 months ago, a single human ship attacked our brothers and sisters of the Third Fleet. It disabled their vessels, humiliated our warriors, and dared to threaten the Valthari Empire. Today, we answer that challenge. He paused, letting his words sink in. We do not know what we will find beyond this border. We do not know what weapons the humans possess, what technology they have developed. But we know one thing with absolute certainty. We are Valthari. We have conquered 100 species and ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We do not fear the unknown. We do not retreat from challenges. We overcome them. Across 2 million ships, crews listened and felt their courage rise. They were the greatest military force ever assembled. How could they possibly fail? Begin the crossing, Kethvar commanded. All ships, advance. The armada moved forward, crossing the invisible border that the humans had marked as their territory. 2 million ships entered the unknown, ready for battle, ready for glory. They found nothing. Weeks passed as the fleet pushed deeper into human space. They moved carefully, spreading out to cover more ground while maintaining communication links. They scanned every system they entered, searching for any sign of human presence. The pattern was the same everywhere. Signs of activity, but no inhabitants. Mining operations that had been automated, agricultural facilities that ran themselves, orbital stations that hung empty and silent around uninhabited worlds. They're evacuating ahead of us, Vethkar reported during a strategy meeting. They must have sensors watching their entire territory. They know we're coming, and they're pulling back. Where are they pulling back to? Kethvar asked. We don't know, Grand Admiral. We haven't found any inhabited worlds yet. No cities, no populations, nothing. Just empty infrastructure. One of the intelligence officers spoke up. We've been analyzing the facilities we've found. The technology is advanced, but not impossibly so. Our engineers believe they understand most of it. Efficient energy systems, automated manufacturing, standard resource extraction. Nothing like the technology we saw at Kepler. Then perhaps the ship at Kepler was unique, another officer suggested. A prototype, or a special weapon. If all their technology was at that level, they wouldn't need automated mining facilities. They would simply create resources from nothing. Kethvar considered this. It was possible. Every species had gaps in their capabilities. Perhaps the humans were advanced in some areas and primitive in others. Perhaps their defensive and weapon technology was exceptional while everything else was merely adequate. Continue the advance, he ordered. Find their population centers. Once we locate their worlds, we will have targets. The fleet pressed on. On the 47th day of the invasion, they found the first inhabited world. The planet was called Sanctuary in the human language. It orbited a yellow star much like the one that had birthed their species. And it was beautiful in a way that made even the hardened Valthari warriors pause. Blue oceans covered most of its surface, broken by green continents and white polar caps. Cities of gleaming spires rose along coastlines and river valleys, connected by transportation networks that crisscrossed the land. Billions of life signs, billions of humans, living on a single world. Finally, Vethkar breathed when the reports came in. Grand Admiral, we have a target. Kethvar studied the sensor data. The planet had orbital defenses. Certainly. Weapons, platforms, and shield generators and sensor stations. But nothing that could stand against 2 million warships. Nothing that could possibly threaten the might of the Valthari Empire. Move the fleet into bombardment position, he ordered. Prepare planet-killing weapons. The armada closed in around Sanctuary like a noose tightening. Ships took up positions in orbit, their weapons powered and ready. The humans would die today, and their world would burn, and the threat they represented would end forever. But something was wrong. Kethvar noticed it first. The planet's population wasn't reacting the way conquered species always reacted. There were no evacuation ships launching, no distress signals being broadcast, no signs of panic or chaos in the cities below. The humans were simply watching, waiting. Grand Admiral, his sensor officer said, voice trembling. I'm detecting additional contacts. Where? Everywhere, sir. They're appearing everywhere. Space itself seemed to tear open. Points of light appeared around the fleet, expanding into holes in reality through which ships emerged. Not dozens of ships. Not hundreds. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. Human vessels of every size poured from the rifts in space, surrounding the Valthari Armada completely. They appeared in perfect formation, as if they had practiced this maneuver 1,000,000 times. They appeared without warning, without any detectable approach. simply materializing from nothing. Within minutes, the Valthari fleet was surrounded, outnumbered, trapped. A transmission came through on all channels. A human voice. Female. Speaking perfect Valthari. Grand Admiral Kethvar. The Terran Confederacy has spent 4 centuries preparing for this moment. We placed warnings at every approach to our space. We seeded those warnings across 1,000 light years, and we waited, patiently, for someone to be foolish enough to ignore them. We wanted to be left alone. You refused. Kethvar tried to respond, but the human continued speaking. You came to our border with 40,000 ships. We sent one vessel to meet you and gave you a chance to leave in peace. You responded with weapons fire. You went home and built an even larger fleet. You returned with 2 million ships, determined to destroy us. We gave you every opportunity to choose differently. You chose war. A pause. Now you will understand why we placed those warnings. Now you will understand why we wanted to be left alone. Now you will understand what humanity has become. The communication ended. Around the Valthari fleet, the human ships began to move, and Grand Admiral Kethvar finally understood the mistake they had made. They had come to fight an enemy they assumed was like every other enemy they had faced. They had brought overwhelming force, confident that numbers would ensure victory. They had believed their own stories about Valthari invincibility. But the humans were not like other enemies. They were something else entirely, and the battle that followed would prove it. The battle began at noon, sanctuary time. Grand Admiral Kethvar watched from the bridge of the Divine Retribution as his fleet opened fire. 2 million warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously, filling space with enough destructive energy to sterilize a solar system. Plasma cannons vaporized asteroids in their path. Particle beams carved lines of light across the darkness. Missiles by the millions streaked toward the human formation. For a moment, the void between fleets became a solid wall of fire, and then the human ships moved. Kethvar had seen the sensor recordings from Kepler. He had studied them for months, trying to understand how a ship could move the way that single vessel had moved. He had convinced himself that it must have been some kind of trick, some illusion or sensor malfunction. He was wrong. The human ships did not dodge. They did not evade. They simply were not where the weapons arrived. One moment they occupied one position, and the next moment they occupied another, with no apparent transition between. The Valthari weapons fire passed through empty space, hitting nothing, destroying nothing. Adjust targeting solutions, Kethvar ordered, fighting to keep his voice calm. Predictive algorithms, full power. The fleet's computers tried to calculate where the human ships would be, tried to lead their targets the way hunters lead fleeing prey. But the humans did not flee. They moved in patterns that seemed random but were clearly coordinated, their ships flowing around each other like a school of fish, never colliding, never hesitating. The first human weapons fire came 30 seconds into the battle. Kethvar had expected something dramatic. Beams of light, explosions, the visible destruction that characterized warfare. Instead, there was almost nothing. Brief flickers of energy, so fast that sensors could barely register them, shooting from the human vessels toward the Valthari fleet. Where those flickers touched, ships died, not exploded, not vaporized. Simply died. A Valthari cruiser would be firing its weapons 1 second, and the next second every light on its hull would go dark. Power cores failed. Weapons went silent. Engines stopped. Life support continued for a time, keeping crews alive to watch their ships become tombs. "What's happening?" someone shouted on the bridge. "What are they doing to us?" Kethvar watched his tactical display as one ship after another went dark. The humans were working through his fleet systematically, disabling vessels with surgical precision. They targeted weapons platforms first, then engines, then communication arrays. Within minutes, entire sections of the Valthari formation had gone silent, and the humans had not lost a single ship. "Grand Admiral," his sensor officer reported, voice shaking with barely controlled fear. "The enemy vessels are not taking damage. Our weapons are having no effect. Their shields absorb everything we throw at them. Increase power. Override the safety limits. Give me maximum output." The Divine Retribution's weapons fired at maximum intensity, beams of energy powerful enough to crack moons. They struck the nearest human vessel squarely, washing over its hull in a wave of destructive force. The human ship emerged from the assault untouched, its strange shifting hull unmarked, and fired a single pulse in return. The divine retribution shuddered. Lights flickered. Displays went dark and came back on with warning messages filling their screens. One by one, systems began to fail. "We're losing power," the engineering officer reported. "The pulse hit our reactor core somehow. Containment is failing. We have maybe 10 minutes before total shutdown." Keith Var stared at his display, watching his flagship die. Around him, the greatest fleet ever assembled was being dismantled with the casual efficiency of workers clearing debris after a storm. In 6 hours, it would be over. The battle lasted exactly 6 hours. When it ended, less than 50,000 Valthari ships remained functional out of 2 million. The rest drifted in the void, dead but intact, their crews alive but helpless. The human fleet surrounded them, watching, waiting. Grand Admiral Kethvar was among the survivors. His flagship had lost power completely, but emergency batteries kept life support running. He sat on his darkened bridge, surrounded by officers who had not spoken in hours, and tried to understand what had happened. They had been defeated. Not just defeated, but utterly destroyed as a fighting force. And the humans had done it without killing anyone. That was the part that Kethvar could not comprehend. The Valthari way of war was total. You destroyed your enemies completely, killed their warriors, enslaved their populations, burned their worlds. Victory meant annihilation of any threat, but the humans had not killed. They had disabled weapons and engines and communications, but they had carefully avoided hitting anything that would cause loss of life. Millions of Valthari warriors floated in the void, alive and unharmed, on ships that would never fly again. It was mercy on a scale that Kethvar had never imagined, and it terrified him more than destruction would have. A communication came through on emergency frequencies, one of the few systems still functioning. The same female voice that had spoken before. "Grand Admiral Kethvar, the battle is over. Your fleet is disabled. You have approximately 6 hours of life support remaining on most vessels before emergency power fails. We are prepared to offer you a choice." Kethvar found his voice. "What choice? You can accept rescue. We will tow your surviving vessels to the border, restore basic systems, and release your crews to return home. We will keep the disabled ships as salvage, but your people will be freed. In exchange, you will carry a message to your emperor. And if we refuse, then we will do nothing. Your life support will fail, your crews will die, and we will still send a message to your emperor, delivered by others." Kethvar closed his eyes. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. The humans had controlled this situation from the moment their ships appeared. "What message would you have me deliver?" "Tell your emperor that the Terran Confederacy has no interest in his empire. We do not want your territory. We do not want your resources. We do not want your people as slaves or subjects. We want only to be left alone. If he honors our borders, we will never trouble him again. And if he doesn't?" A pause. When the voice returned, it was colder than before. "Then we will come to him. And we will not be merciful a second time." The rescue operation took 3 days. Human vessels moved through the debris field of the battle, attaching tow cables to disabled Valthari ships and pulling them toward the border. They worked efficiently and without hostility, crews communicating with their former enemies through translation devices, coordinating the complex logistics of moving thousands of crippled vessels. Kethvar watched from the bridge of a human rescue ship. He had been transferred there after his flagship's life support began to fail, and he found himself surrounded by the creatures he had come to destroy. They were strange beings, the humans, smaller than Valthari, softer looking, with only 2 eyes and smooth skin instead of scales. They moved differently, spoke differently, thought differently, and yet there was something familiar about them, something that Kethvar recognized in their eyes. They were warriors, different from Valthari warriors, fighting in different ways for different reasons, but warriors nonetheless. They understood duty and sacrifice and the terrible mathematics of conflict. They simply applied that understanding in ways the Valthari had never considered. A human officer approached him on the second day. She was young by their standards, with dark hair and eyes the color of deep water, and she introduced herself as Commander Chen. "Grand Admiral," she said in perfect Valthari. "I've been assigned as your liaison until you reach the border. Is there anything you need?" Kethvar studied her. "I need to understand. Why did you not destroy us? We came to burn your worlds. We came with planet-killing weapons. Why show us mercy? Commander Chen was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. 400 years ago, humanity made first contact with an alien species. They were called the Dreth. They came to our solar system with a fleet much like yours. Overwhelming force that we could not match. They demanded our surrender. When we refused, they attacked. She paused, and Kethvar saw something in her eyes that he recognized. Pain, old pain, inherited from generations past. They destroyed our colonies on Mars and the outer planets. They bombarded Earth, killing billions. They drove us back to our homeworld and prepared to finish what they had started. We were weeks away from extinction. What happened? We found another way. Our scientists had been working on experimental technologies, things we did not fully understand. In our desperation, we deployed them. The Dreth fleet was destroyed in hours. Their species no longer exists. Kethvar felt something cold settle in his chest. You destroyed them? Completely? We had no choice. We were fighting for survival. We used weapons that we could not control, technologies that we did not understand, and we killed every Dreth we could find. When it was over, we had won. But we had also become something we never wanted to be. Commander Chen met his eyes. That's why we show mercy now. Because we learned what happens when you don't. The Dreth pushed us to the edge, and we pushed back with everything we had. We became destroyers, exterminators, and we hated what we had become. So you chose a different path. We chose to give warnings, to ask others to leave us alone before forcing the issue, to disable rather than destroy when possible, to offer mercy even to those who deserve none. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We placed beacons at every approach to our space. We made our warnings clear. We hoped that others would be wiser than the Dreth, but we ignored them, yes. And now you understand why we asked you to turn back. Not because we feared you, not because we couldn't destroy you, but because we didn't want to, because every enemy we kill makes us more like the thing we were when we killed the Dreth, and we never want to be that thing again. Kethvar sat in silence for a long time after Commander Chen left. He thought about the Dreth, a species he had never heard of, wiped from existence by the humans they had tried to conquer. He thought about the mercy the humans had shown his fleet, the careful precision with which they had disabled ships without killing crews, and he thought about what would happen if Emperor Zalveth ignored this warning. 2. The surviving ships reached the border on the 5th day. Human technicians had restored basic systems, enough to allow the Valthari vessels to limp home under their own power. Grand Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of a crippled dreadnought, watching the warning beacon grow larger in his viewport. The beacon that he had ignored. The beacon that had tried to tell them what they were facing. The beacon that had offered them a chance to choose differently. A final transmission came from Commander Chen's vessel. Grand Admiral, we have restored your communications and navigation systems. You are free to return to your space. Please deliver our message to your Emperor. I will. One more thing. Her voice carried a note of something that might have been sympathy. We know what will happen when you return. Your Emperor will execute you for failure, the way he executed your predecessor. We wanted you to know that we're sorry. You did not deserve what happened today. You were following orders, serving your people, doing your duty. In another universe, we might have been allies. Kethvar considered this. She was right. The Emperor would kill him. That was the Valthari way. Failure meant death, regardless of circumstances. I understand, he said. But I will deliver your message nonetheless. My life for the lives of millions. It is an acceptable trade. May your journey home be peaceful, Grand Admiral, and may your Emperor choose wisdom. The human ships withdrew, disappearing back into their territory. The warning beacon continued its eternal broadcast, its message now carrying a weight it had not had before. Grand Admiral Kethvar ordered his fleet to begin the long journey home. Behind him, the human territory stretched into darkness, quiet and waiting. They had shown mercy twice now. They would not show it a third time. Grand Admiral Kethvar knelt before the eternal throne and waited for death. The journey home had taken 3 months. 3 months of traveling through Valthari space in crippled ships, passing stations and colonies that stared at them with a mixture of horror and disbelief. The greatest fleet ever assembled, reduced to limping survivors. The invincible empire, utterly humiliated. Word had spread ahead of them. By the time they reached the homeworld, everyone knew. The subject races whispered in the shadows. The Volthari military maintained discipline, but doubt had crept into their ranks, and the Emperor had summoned Kethvar to the throne room, alone, to deliver his report. "Tell me what happened," Emperor Zalvith said. His voice was quiet, controlled, but Kethvar could hear the rage beneath it. "My Emperor, we crossed the border with 2 million ships. We found an inhabited world called Sanctuary and moved to attack. The humans were waiting for us. They appeared from nowhere. Hundreds of thousands of vessels, and surrounded our fleet completely. And then, they destroyed us." Kethvar paused, choosing his next words carefully. "They disabled our ships with weapons we could not understand or counter. Our attacks did nothing to them. Their defenses absorbed everything we threw at them. The battle lasted 6 hours. At the end, less than 50,000 of our ships remained operational." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. 2 million ships, against how many humans? "We estimated between 300,000 and 500,000 vessels, my Emperor. We outnumbered them significantly, and yet they defeated you." "Yes, my Emperor. Explain how this is possible." Kethvar raised his head slightly, meeting the Emperor's gaze. If he was going to die, he would die speaking truth. "The humans are not like us, my Emperor. They are not like any species we have ever encountered. Their technology is beyond our understanding. Their ships move in ways that violate everything we know about physics. Their weapons can disable our vessels without causing any damage, and their coordination is perfect. Every ship moves as if controlled by a single mind. There is no communication between them, no orders given, no visible command structure. They simply act together, thousands of vessels moving as one organism. You speak as if they are gods. No, my Emperor, they are something else, something that we have never seen before." Kethvar took a breath. "They sent a message with me. They said they have no interest in our empire. They do not want our territory, our resources, or our people. They want only to be left alone. If we honor their borders, they will never trouble us again. And if we don't, they said they would come to us, and they would not be merciful a second time." Emperor Zalvith rose from the eternal throne and walked to the great window overlooking the palace gardens. He stood there for a long time, his back to Kethvar, watching the sun set over the carefully maintained wilderness. "You failed me," the Emperor said finally. "You took the might of the Empire and led it to destruction. By our laws you should die. I understand, my Emperor, but you also brought me something valuable. Information, understanding of what we face." The Emperor turned. "I am not a fool, Kethvar. I know when I am beaten. 2 million ships could not defeat them. What could? 3 million? 5 million? The entire military force of the Empire?" Kethvar did not answer. He did not need to. "You will not die today," the Emperor said. "You will return to your fleet and begin preparations for defense of our territory. The humans say they want only to be left alone. Perhaps they speak truth. Perhaps they do not. Either way, we must be prepared. My Emperor, you mean to honor their borders? I mean to survive." The Emperor's scales darkened with something that might have been shame. The Volthari have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years by knowing when to fight and when to wait. This is a time to wait. We will rebuild our fleet. We will study what data we have on their technology, and we will watch. Kethvar bowed his head. "What of the message, my Emperor? They asked that I deliver it to you directly. You have delivered it. The Terran Confederacy wishes to be left alone. They have made their position clear." The Emperor returned to his throne. "But I have questions. Questions that cannot be answered by messages. I want to know who these humans are. I want to know where they came from. I want to know how they became what they are. My Emperor, the human who spoke to you, the one called Commander Chen. She told you about the Dreth, a species that attacked humanity and was destroyed. I have had my intelligence services searching our archives since your message arrived. The Dreth do not exist in any of our records. They are not listed among the extinct species we know of. They are not mentioned in any historical document we possess." Kethvar felt a chill run through him. "They were destroyed 400 years ago, my Emperor. Perhaps they existed in a region of space we have not reached. Perhaps, or perhaps they existed right here, in what is now our territory, and were erased so completely that we never even knew they had been. The Emperor leaned forward. Think about it, Kethvar. The humans have technology that can disable entire fleets without causing damage. They have ships that appear from nowhere. They have weapons that we cannot understand. What else might they have? What could a civilization like that do to an enemy they truly wanted to destroy? The implications hung in the air between them. You believe the Dreth were in our space? I believe the humans have been watching us for a very long time. I believe they placed their warning beacons not to mark the edge of their territory, but to see who would ignore them. I believe they wanted to know which species in this galaxy would respect boundaries and which would not. A test, yes, and we failed it. The Emperor's eyes burned with cold fury. But we are not the Dreth. We will not be erased. We will learn from this defeat. We will adapt, and we will ensure that when the humans look at us, they see a species that has learned its lesson. And if they come anyway, then we will fight. Not with fleets, not with armies. We will fight in ways they do not expect. We are Valthari. We have survived for 12,000 years by being adaptable, by being patient, by knowing our enemies. The Emperor gestured for Kethvar to rise. Go. Rebuild what you can of our fleet. Strengthen our defenses. And find out everything possible about the humans. I want to know their history, their culture, their weaknesses. I want to know what made them what they are. It will be done. My Emperor. Kethvar rose and turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. My Emperor, there is one more thing. Something Commander Chen said that has troubled me. Speak. She said that in another universe, we might have been allies. She said it with regret, as if she genuinely wished things had been different. Kethvar paused. I have fought many enemies in my career. I have never met one who showed regret for defeating me. Emperor Zalveth was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps that is the most dangerous thing about them, he said finally. They do not hate us. They do not want to destroy us. They simply want to be left alone. And somehow, that is more terrifying than any threat could be. In the months that followed, the Valthari Empire changed. Not obviously. Not dramatically. The Empire still controlled its vast territory. The subject races still served their masters. The military still trained and prepared for war. But something fundamental had shifted. The intelligence services worked around the clock, gathering every scrap of information about humanity they could find. They interviewed survivors of the battle. They analyzed the sensor data until every frame had been studied 1,000 times. They searched ancient records for any mention of humans or Terrans or any species matching their description. What they found was disturbing. References to humans appeared in the oldest records of dozens of species across the galaxy. Brief mentions, fragments of stories, warnings passed down through generations. A species that came from a small yellow star. A species that had been nearly destroyed and had rebuilt themselves. A species that had become something other than what they had been. The stories disagreed on details but agreed on one thing. The humans were not to be disturbed. Some species had ignored this advice. Those species no longer existed. The Dreth were not unique. They were simply the most recent of many civilizations that had pushed too hard against humanity and had been erased in response. Some had been destroyed quickly, in wars that lasted only days. Others had been undone slowly, over centuries, as human influence spread through their societies and unmade them from within. And in every case, the pattern was the same. The humans had warned them first, had given them chances to turn back, had shown mercy when possible, but when pushed too far, when their warnings were ignored and their patience exhausted, they had responded with force that no species could withstand. They call themselves the Terran Confederacy, one intelligence report noted, but this is merely their current name. In the past, they have used other names: the Soul Alliance, the Human Federation, the Earth Collective. The names change, but the species remains the same. They have existed in some form for over 4,000 years. They have outlasted empires that rose and fell without ever knowing humanity existed. Kethvar read these reports with growing unease. The humans had not simply developed advanced technology. They had fundamentally changed what they were: neural linking, genetic enhancement, artificial intelligence integration. Over centuries, they had merged with their machines, with each other, becoming something that was no longer purely biological. They thought together. They felt together. They fought together. A human fleet was not a collection of ships with individual crews. It was a single organism, distributed across thousands of vessels, acting with perfect coordination because it was, in a very real sense, one mind. And that mind had been shaped by 4,000 years of survival against a hostile galaxy. 6 months after the battle, the subject races began to rebel. It started slowly. A mining colony refused to meet its quota. A manufacturing world stopped shipping supplies. A military garrison mutinied and declared independence. Small things, easily crushed individually. But they kept happening. The Volthari responded as they always had, with overwhelming force. They sent fleets to rebellious worlds and bombarded them into submission. They executed leaders and enslaved populations and made examples that would discourage future defiance. But the rebellions continued. They grew. They spread. And in the shadows, weapons began to appear. Weapons that no subject race should have possessed. Advanced energy shields, quantum communication devices, ships that could evade Volthari sensors, human technology, spreading through the Empire like a virus. Kethvar reported his findings to the Emperor with a heavy heart. "They're arming our subjects, my Emperor. They're not invading us. They're not attacking our territory. They're simply giving weapons to everyone who wants to fight us. And they're doing it in ways we cannot trace or stop." "How?" the Emperor demanded. "We don't know. The technology appears in hands that should not have it, on worlds we have controlled for thousands of years. Either they have agents we cannot detect, or they have methods of delivery we cannot understand. Perhaps both." The Emperor stared at the reports, his scales darkening with rage. "They said they wanted to be left alone. They said they had no interest in our empire. They don't want our empire, my Emperor. They want to destroy it. But they don't want to do it themselves. They want our subjects to do it for them. They want us to fall from within, brought down by the species we have oppressed. This is not war. This is assassination. Yes, my Emperor. And it's working." The rebellions continued to spread. Month by month, year by year, the Empire's grip loosened. Worlds that had been loyal for millennia turned against their masters. Fleets that had served the Emperor for generations defected to rebel causes. The greatest empire in galactic history began to crumble. Not from invasion, but from revolution. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the border, the humans watched. They had offered mercy twice. They had given the Volthari every chance to choose a different path. The Volthari had refused. And now they would learn what humanity did to those who ignored their warnings. The Volthari Empire fell in 3 years. It did not fall to human weapons. It did not fall to human soldiers. It fell to hope. On 100 worlds, species that had been crushed under Volthari rule for thousands of years rose up and demanded freedom. They fought with weapons that appeared from nowhere. Weapons that could match Volthari military technology. Weapons that the humans had quietly spread throughout the Empire like seeds waiting to grow. The Volthari tried to stop it. They sent fleets to rebellious systems and armies to occupied worlds. They burned cities and slaughtered populations and did everything that had kept them in power for 12 millennia. But it was not enough. Every fleet they sent to crush one rebellion left another region undefended. Every army they deployed weakened their hold somewhere else. And the weapons kept coming, appearing in new hands, on new worlds, fueling new revolutions. The humans never appeared. They never attacked. They never invaded. They simply watched as the Empire tore itself apart. Grand Admiral Kethvar spent those 3 years fighting fires that could not be extinguished. He won battles but lost worlds. He crushed uprisings but saw new ones spring up behind him. He served his Emperor faithfully, knowing that it was hopeless, because duty demanded nothing less. In the final year, when it became clear that the Empire could not survive, Kethvar requested an audience with Emperor Zalveth. He found his ruler a changed being. The proud, commanding figure who had laughed at human warnings was gone, replaced by something broken and desperate. "You have a proposal," the Emperor said. It was not a question. "My Emperor, the war is lost. Our military is scattered across 1,000 battlefields, fighting enemies it cannot defeat. Our subject races have united against us, armed with technology we cannot match. We have perhaps 6 months before the rebellion reaches the homeworld itself. I know this. Tell me something useful." Kethvar took a breath. "We can end this. We can contact the humans and ask for terms. They offered mercy twice before. Perhaps they will offer it again. You want me to surrender to beings we have never met?" To bow before creatures who have not even bothered to face us in honest combat? I want you to survive, my Emperor. I want our species to survive. The humans do not want to destroy us. They said this from the beginning. They want only to be left alone. If we agree to their terms, if we truly surrender and promise to never threaten them again, perhaps they will let us live. Emperor Zalveth stared at his oldest and most loyal commander. In his 4 eyes, Kethvar could see the war between pride and survival, between the traditions of millennia and the cold reality of their situation. If I do this, the Emperor said slowly, the Valthari Empire ends. Everything my ancestors built, everything we have fought and died for across 12,000 years, it all ends. Yes, my Emperor. But our people continue. Our culture survives. Our future remains. The Empire is gone, regardless of what we do. The only question is whether we go with it. The silence stretched for a long moment. Contact them, the Emperor finally said. See what they want. The human response came within hours. A single ship appeared at the edge of Valthari space, smaller than any warship, painted in colors that seemed to shift and flow. It broadcast a simple message requesting permission to send a delegation to the Valthari homeworld for negotiations. Emperor Zalveth granted permission. He had no choice. The human vessel landed in the palace gardens, the same carefully maintained wilderness that the Emperor had watched from his window for his entire reign. A delegation of 3 humans emerged and walked through the ancient corridors to the throne room, passing guards who watched them with a mixture of fear and hatred. The lead human was a woman with silver hair and eyes the color of deep space. She introduced herself as Ambassador Lin, and she spoke perfect Valthari without any visible translation device. Behind her stood 2 others, a man and a woman, who said nothing but watched everything with unblinking intensity. Emperor Zalveth, Ambassador Lin said, bowing slightly. Thank you for receiving us. I know this must be difficult. Spare me your sympathy, the Emperor replied. You have destroyed my empire. You have armed my enemies. You have brought down everything my family built across 600 generations. Do not pretend you regret it. Ambassador Lin did not flinch. I do regret it, Emperor. Truly. We gave you every opportunity to choose differently. We placed warnings at your borders. We sent 1 ship against your first fleet and showed you what we could do. We defeated your second fleet without killing a single Valthari and asked only to be left alone. At every step, we offered you a way out. You refused. You could have destroyed us at the beginning. You could have ended this before it started. Yes, but that would have made us what we do not wish to be. We spent centuries becoming what we are, Emperor. Not just technologically, but morally. We learned that destruction is easy but survival is hard. We learned that mercy is not weakness but strength. We learned that the universe does not reward cruelty, no matter how efficient it seems. She stepped forward, her strange eyes meeting the Emperor's. When the Dreth attacked us 4,000 years ago, they were everything you are. Powerful, arrogant, certain that their strength gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. They pushed us to the edge of extinction, and we pushed back. We destroyed them completely. We erased them from existence so thoroughly that no trace remained. Then why not do the same to us? Because we hated what we had become. Because we looked at ourselves after the war and did not recognize what we saw. We had become destroyers, exterminators, no better than the Dreth themselves. We spent centuries trying to find a different path. We built the warning beacons. We established borders and declared that we would never expand beyond them. We created a way of war that disabled rather than killed. We did everything we could think of to avoid becoming monsters again. Ambassador Lin's voice softened. You forced our hand, Emperor. You ignored our warnings, attacked our territory, and refused every offer of peace. We could not allow that to stand. But we also could not bring ourselves to destroy you the way we destroyed the Dreth. So we found a third path. We gave your subjects the means to free themselves. We let your empire fall to its own cruelty, rather than to our weapons. Emperor Zalveth sat in silence for a long moment. What do you want from us? Nothing. We want nothing from you except your absence. You will withdraw to your homeworld and the nearest surrounding systems. You will never expand beyond those borders. You will release all subject races from your control. Your empire is over. And my people? What becomes of us? That is up to you. You will govern yourselves as you see fit, within your borders. You will develop your culture and technology. You will live your lives. We will not interfere unless you threaten others. If you do, we will return, and we will not be merciful. A third time, the emperor looked around his throne room, at the pillars built from the bones of conquered kings, at the windows carved from single pieces of crystal, at all the trappings of power that would soon mean nothing. This is not surrender, he said slowly. This is extinction in slow motion. Without expansion, without conquest, my people will stagnate. We will decline. In 1,000 years, the Valthari will be a footnote in galactic history. That depends on what you choose to become. Ambassador Lin smiled for the first time. You have always defined yourselves by conquest, by power, by domination. Perhaps without those things, you will find new definitions. Perhaps you will become something better than you were. Or perhaps you are right, and you will fade away. Either outcome is acceptable to us. Acceptable? The universe does not owe any species survival, Emperor. It does not guarantee that those who exist today will exist tomorrow. Every civilization must earn its continuation through what it contributes, through what it builds, through what it becomes. The Valthari have spent 12,000 years taking. Perhaps it is time to learn how to give. She turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Grand Admiral Kethvar advised you to seek peace. He has shown wisdom and courage throughout this conflict. If I were you, I would listen to him in the years to come. He understands what few Valthari seem to understand. That strength is not the same as power. That mercy is not the same as weakness. That the greatest victories are the ones that do not require destruction. Ambassador Lin and her companions walked out of the throne room, through the ancient corridors, and back to their ship. They lifted off from the palace gardens and disappeared into the sky, leaving the broken emperor alone with his thoughts. The peace terms were signed 1 month later. The Valthari withdrew from every world they had conquered, releasing thousands of species from bondage. Some of those species celebrated. Others immediately began fighting among themselves for dominance of their regions. The galaxy that had been united under Valthari rule fractured into 1,000 competing powers. The humans returned to their territory and sealed their borders once more. The warning beacons continued to broadcast, their message now carrying a weight that everyone in the galaxy understood. Centuries passed. The Valthari did not fade away as their emperor had predicted. Freed from the endless need for expansion, they turned their energies inward. They developed new arts, new sciences, new philosophies. They became traders and diplomats rather than conquerors. They learned to build relationships instead of extracting tribute. It was not easy. Many Valthari resented their fall from power. Some tried to rebuild their military and resume their conquests. Those efforts were quietly crushed by human intervention before they could gain momentum. But slowly, generation by generation, the Valthari changed. They became part of the galactic community rather than its oppressor. They earned respect through cooperation rather than demanding it through force. And in schools across 100 liberated worlds, children learned the story of the empire that had ignored the warning and paid the price. 1,000 years after the fall of the Valthari Empire, a young scholar named Vexthara traveled to the border of human space. She had spent her life studying the ancient conflict, reading the records, interviewing the descendants of those who had lived through it. She wanted to understand what had happened. She wanted to know why the humans had acted as they did. She wanted to see the warning beacons for herself. The beacon floated exactly where it had floated for 14 centuries, a cylinder covered in blinking lights and strange symbols. Its message still broadcast across all frequencies, in thousands of languages, living and dead. This space is claimed by the Terran Confederacy. Proceed no further. This is your only warning. Vexthara listened to the message and tried to imagine what her ancestors had thought when they first heard it. Had they laughed, as the story said? Had they been so confident in their power that they could not conceive of a threat? She transmitted a message toward human space, not expecting a response. She simply wanted to speak, to acknowledge the beings who had changed galactic history. My name is Vexthara. I am a descendant of the Valthari who once ruled this galaxy. I have come to pay respect to those who taught my people humility. I have come to say thank you for showing us mercy when we deserved none. I have come to promise that we have learned from our mistakes. She waited, not really expecting anything. The humans had been silent for 1,000 years. They had withdrawn behind their borders and never emerged. Some said they had transcended physical existence entirely. Others said they were simply patient, watching, waiting. A response came. Vexthera of the Valthari. Your message is received and appreciated. We have watched your people grow and change over the centuries. We have seen you become builders instead of destroyers, partners instead of masters. We are pleased. Vexthera's hearts raced. She was speaking with humans, actual humans, the beings her ancestors had feared above all others. Thank you, she said. Thank you for giving us the chance to change. All species have that chance. Most waste it. Your people did not. That is worth acknowledging. A pause. Then the voice continued. Our warnings were not placed to frighten. They were placed to give others a choice. The choice between peace and conflict, between respect and conquest, between wisdom and folly. Your ancestors chose poorly. You have chosen well. Remember that as you go forward. Remember that every species defines itself by its choices. The communication ended. The beacon continued its broadcast. Vexthara turned her ship toward home, carrying a story that would be told for generations. The humans were still there, behind their borders, watching. They had been watching for 4,000 years. They would probably be watching for 4,000 more. And as long as their warnings were respected, they would remain silent, peaceful, content to be left alone. But the galaxy knew now. Everyone knew. The warning was real, and no one would ever ignore it again.